And welcome back. As usual, a lot of news on the impeachment front. And let's start off with the timeline. The House Intelligence Committee wrapped up public hearings last week, and it's working on its report as we speak. It's expected to be finished by the middle of next week. Now, Chairman Adam Schiff, he says they have, quote, massive amounts of evidence, and the report will reflect that. Then it heads over to Judiciary, which is expected to draft articles of impeachment, which could be voted on before Christmas. That means the President of the United States could get impeached before the end of this calendar year. The Judiciary Committee, it's holding its first public hearing a week from today, starting at 10 a.m. And yes, we will be taking it live for you. We'll also be providing full coverage during RFL beginning at 6 p.m. that night. If the House votes to impeach as expected, a Senate trial could start as early as January. But it'll be a heavy lift to remove the president from office. You need 20 Republicans to join every single Democrat in the Senate for that to happen, and so far there's no indication that's even close. We're also getting new information about the withholding of aid to Ukraine. House Democrats, they've released the final depositions from closed-door hearings, and the Budget Office official Mark Sandy, he testified that his office wasn't even in the loop about the aid, and that is causing widespread dissatisfaction in the ranks, including 2 people outright quitting. Sandy also questioned whether holding up the aid was even legal. And State Department official Phil Reeker said under oath that Rudy Giuliani was right in the middle of all the shady deals. With Ukraine, Reeker here joins a long list of other witnesses who have spoken out about Rudy, and as I said, under oath. Also, we might be seeing a rift in the bromance between the Donald and his personal attorney. Take a listen to what the president has to say with an interview just yesterday with Bill O'Reilly.
What was Rudy Giuliani doing in Ukraine on your behalf?
Well, you have to ask that to Rudy, but Rudy, I don't even know.
So you didn't direct him to go to Ukraine and do anything or put any heat on
No,
him?
I didn't direct him, but he is a warrior. Rudy's a warrior. Rudy went. He possibly saw something, but you have to understand, Rudy has other people that he represents.
No, I know.
So even though it looks like the president's starting to cut Rudy loose, Rudy doesn't seem too concerned.
I've seen things written like, he's going to throw me under the bus.
Right.
When they say that, I say, he isn't, but I have insurance.
Sounds like a mob trap. Then there's the big question hovering over everything connecting to Trump and Ukraine. What did the president know, and when did he know it? Well, it turns out we have new reporting that shows Trump knew about the whistleblower complaint, and this is the big word, before he released the aid to Ukraine, which contradicts a lot of the prior statements he's made. Here's the updated timeline. We know the White House first ordered the Ukraine aid to be blocked back in early July, a fact widely known when Trump asked the Ukrainian president for a favor on July 25th. And we know that the whistleblower filed his complaint on August 12th. New reporting shows Trump was briefed on the complaint in late August and that the Ukraine aid was mentioned in that report, which means Trump knew about it at least a whole 11 days at minimum before he finally released the aid. Former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi joins us now. All right, Gene. We follow the bouncing ball. We all know by now this isn't just a legal trial. This is certainly a political one. And we haven't seen, if you look at the polls and with the senators that would have to change their opinion, any indication that we're getting any closer, despite the fact that I thought Schiff laid out a pretty compelling case of a high crime and a misdemeanor. Nonetheless, and even with all the additional reporting, tell me what you're looking for next Wednesday when Jerry Nadler and Judiciary gets in there. I know they're going through a historical to go through the precedents and everything else, but they got to decide which articles they're going to pursue. Do you think they're going to come after it at the end of the day with plural articles, and what would they be?
Okay, what's going to happen next week, if I had to bet money, is this, Richard, is Jerry Nadler is going to make this a very somber proceeding. He has to. You can't make it like a food fight in Animal House between John Belushi and members of that fraternity. It has to be very serious and somber. He has to do what Adam Schiff did. That's number one. Number two, they're going to have legal experts talk about the history of impeachment, what it was meant to accomplish, and that will be sort of the lecture, the law that they have to apply. And the House Impeachment Committee is basically like a grand jury. You have law, and you're going to apply it to the undisputed facts. And these facts are undisputed. And here's my prediction on articles. You're going to have a global article on abuse of power relating to what I call Ukraine-gate, because that is textbook bribery. You're going to have an article of impeachment regarding the president's efforts not to comply with subpoenas, the absolute immunity argument that is total hogwash. And the third article of impeachment could be this. It could be one or two overt acts from Volume 2 of Robert Mueller's report, and there may be a fourth regarding lies to the public, which was an article or considered during the Nixon administration. So that's my prediction for next week.
All right, let's say, Gene, for once, this new Supreme Court doesn't let us down, and they say, you got settled law here as it relates to Trump's taxes. Have at it. You got the 8 years that the lower court said that you should have been privy to. They're going to do that by, at the latest, mid-December, probably December 12th to 13th or something. If they're building up these articles, Gene, and then you have something coming on the financial side, and we'll get to what else is going on in New York, does any of that stuff potentially color that's outside of Ukraine, but it still speaks to abuse of power? I mean, how is this crafted when you never know what's going to turn up with this president?
Well, Richard, on the tax thing, I wouldn't hold out hope that you're going to get any more information on that issue between now and what I predict will be the week before Christmas when they vote on articles of impeachment in the full House. You probably won't get a ruling on the taxes until maybe March, April, or May. So that decision, I would be shocked if the Supreme Court did not rule that the Manhattan DA has the right to those tax returns into possession of a third party. So that ridiculous OLC memo of the Justice Department doesn't really apply. So I don't think you're going to get any more information on taxes between now and when the full House votes. But I got to tell you this. I worked for the tax division of the Department of Justice for 11 years. I did civil and criminal taxes. I've seen it all. And I'm like a hound dog when it comes to what I think is in a return. And I would be shocked. I would be shocked if the Trump org tax returns and his personal returns are not a plethora of false assertions and statements and outright crimes. I would be shocked if they're copacetic.
So under that same kind of bucket, would you put David Pecker from the National Enquirer, who's cooperating and testifying apparently with an immunity deal, and obviously the CFO there over at Trump, or the former Weisselberger? Those guys got to have stories to tell. You would say whatever comes out of that will have nothing to do with the impeachment, but may have something to do with the election regarding revelations.
I totally agree with that. And I represented Stormy Daniels' former attorney who negotiated the NDA with Trump. And that's all I can say about my former client. But I can tell you this. David Pecker is going to send chills down the spine of Donald Trump and Alan Weisselberg and also Don Jr. I can tell you that right now. David Pecker has a treasure trove of information that could be very damaging to the president, Weisselberg, and others. And the Manhattan DA is sniffing around because they made false entries in the business record. And going back to my tax background, Michael Cohen pleaded to a federal election law violation. But looking at it from a tax view, and I did that, there was a conspiracy to violate the tax laws, possibly because if the corporation Trump Org willfully and falsely claimed the fee to Michael Cohen as a legal business expense, that is a tax crime. Because it was not a legal business expense. They were reimbursing him for hush money. That's not a legal expense of a corporation. So that is a possible tax crime. David Pecker, if I were Alan Weisselberg and the president, Thanksgiving meal tomorrow may be a little bit tense in light of what I've heard about David Pecker cooperating with the state prosecutors, not with the Southern District. And we know he cooperated with the Southern District, and the Southern District has the right, with a court order, to give over that information to the state prosecutors.
Last question, Gene. There's a theory floating around from a former federal prosecutor that says when it comes to the people that would really be helpful, their testimony coming back to impeachment, obviously John Bolton jumps to the top of mind, but you got Mick Mulvaney, Pompeo. I could go up and down the list. There may be a reason why Democrats conspicuously haven't pushed really hard for subpoenas with getting these guys in front of the court and making a stink. Because when, assuming it gets to the trial phase in the Senate, and you've got as the judge over there, Justice Roberts, he can fast track anything. There's no court to appeal his decision to. And he'll make a decision if, in fact, they then push to subpoena certain witnesses to either compel them to testify. You buy that at all, or does it just sound good because it seems to be made for TV?
No, I think that's a good theory. The Senate trial is not a trial like you'd have in federal court, and I had 100 of them. It's a little different animal, but there is a chief judge, Roberts, who's going to be the trial judge, and he can issue subpoenas to anybody. He could even issue a subpoena to the President of the United States. Now, once that subpoena is issued, there would be a motion to quash it, and then with alacrity, Roberts could rule on whether absolute immunity applies, executive immunity applies, whether the crime-fraud exception applies. That I actually think that's probably a good strategy than going through this parallel collateral appeal process that they're doing civilly in federal court. I think that's not a bad situation. The first person whom I would subpoena if I were doing the prosecution of this case in the Senate would be John Bolton. Get him in front of John Roberts, get him in a sidebar or a closed hearing to talk about what he would say and what he knows, and get Roberts to determine, is this executive privilege? Is it crime-fraud exception? I submit there is a big crime-fraud exception. It goes back to it's textbook bribery. And anything that the president is told or says during a crime, a conspiracy to commit bribery, that is not privileged under any privilege.
It's going to be a fascinating couple months ahead of us. Gene, always appreciate the time. Thank you so much. And have a great Thanksgiving for yourself.
Happy Thanksgiving.
All right, everybody, when we come back, the Supreme Court, we talked about how big a role they may play here in the impeachment showdown. Well, Chief Justice Roberts, as I said, he'll preside over the Senate trial if and when the House impeaches the president. Plus, there are other cases that the High Court could rule on that could have a huge impact on the outcome. We'll have the details up next.